We rolling?
Yep, we're rolling. Howdy, folks.
Howdy.
Happy New Year. Welcome to the January 6th meeting of the Telecom Advisory Committee. We have a public speak section. Howdy. Are you here to share something with us today?
No, I can't because I just want to see what this was about.
Okay, cool.
Great.
What's your name?
Oh, my name is Ryan.
Oh, Ryan. Pleasure. Good to have you. Okay. So, did everybody have a chance to look at those minutes that you had sent out? Are there any adjustment? No. Is there any motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Hi.
All right. It's approved. All right. So, moving on. I know that was Professor Yu's municipal assessment was quite dense, and did anybody dive into that? Yeah?
I scanned it.
Scanned it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Did anybody take anything away from that?
Which one are we talking about?
This was the Professor Yu Municipal Fiber Assessment paper from UPenn.
From,
The paper which had been written, which was somewhat critical of the...
oh, that. No, I mean, we
I don't
discussed
put
it.
a lot of value in a study that is funded by the cable industry.
Fair assessment.
I mean, yeah, there's always that, in the world of like economic public policy research where I live, there is always a thought of, I mean, you can take things on their merits, but it's always important to keep an eye on like, how is this, what is the funding source for this?
And who benefits from the report.
You know, we should entertain them and, always, be fair and balanced about these things. But by the same token, I wouldn't waste a lot of time, on something like this. It's pretty obvious.
I read the report, I guess, maybe kind of thoroughly. And it seemed that it was it was very limited in scope. It really only covered 4 years of time, and the utilities which were included in the report, which had been in operation for an extended period of time before those 4 years, were very favorable in their results during that time. But the utilities which were included, which had either started immediately prior to the 4-year period or during it, showed very poor cash flow. But they were in their investment phase. So it did seem to be a bit curious as to why they would put so much emphasis on cash flow in that, knowing that that would be an investment phase for these utilities.
Is it curious?
It depends on the tone of voice in which you say curious.
It's what I would do if I wanted to.
Yes.
Yeah.
I do think that it's important that if we were to move forward with something like what we're talking about, that we really have a good handle on what cash flow will look like and our ability to repay our debt if we do incur debt. And to see that there have been municipalities which have tried this and taken out a bunch of money and not been able to cover that debt because they haven't been able to generate the cash flow they expect, either because they priced it way too cheap or they built out way too fast and didn't get what they expected right away.
Which includes some neighbors in the valley. So, yes, by all means, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I was also impressed by the rebuttal study that had found so many errors and miscalculations in the original study that that also took credence away from Yu's study.
I agree. Yeah, it was surprising how many.
I mean, several of those municipalities that had no cash flow was because the Yu study made an assumption that they had a balloon payment at the end, and they didn't.
Right.
I think it's like, I don't think that there's any dispute though that like some municipalities have tried this and it hasn't worked out for them. Like that's true. There's there's examples of that.
Sure.
And I do think that while it's definitely important to keep in mind what the motivations are of anyone who's passing on information, I also think that it's valuable to see in some cases where hasn't this worked and what went wrong and how are those different than the places that have worked very well. I think that is part of our mandate.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. So, was there any other takeaways from this recommended report for us? Okay. Well, thank you. So let's move on. So I printed out here, I only have 4 because they're so dense, but if we could, this is kind of extracts from the Northampton study, which Aaron had shared with us, which actually was really, really useful, I
I
thought.
looked through that.
So Aaron, thank you really, actually quite a bit for sharing.
Sure.
So I put in their table of contents, of course, but this really does skip around a bit. Did people read through this, or glance through it, or everybody? I thought it was pretty cool. One of the things that I saw them doing, well, kind of the format, this was a commissioned study that they did with Precipio, which I wasn't familiar with, but I guess they're a fiber cabling distributor.
This was 3 or 4 years ago, if I remember. When was it done?
2015, maybe?
Yeah, okay. That's what I remember.
Yeah. There was some emphasis on smart city technology, and on, there was some commentary about, well, in the first couple pages, about how cities incorporate smart city technology in their master plan. And I don't think that's something we've really talked about.
No, it hasn't really been yet, and
Does the current master plan address that at all?
the smart cities stuff. I don't know. I get so much smart cities email, and I feel like a lot of it is some of it's probably really, really cool and helpful, but it's something I haven't devoted enough time to, partially because it's difficult for me as someone who's not a practitioner to separate the just junk that people are trying to upsell from the potentially really cool and useful tech, and figure out so what kind of data are we actually talking about? How is it being collected? How is that useful? Who is the person in the city who's actually able to take this and turn it into something digestible? And what decisions does it actually change? People talk about it maybe counting cars, to try and get a real-time sense of where traffic flows are. Okay, so say that we set up a bunch of cameras linked into the fiber to make that stuff happen. The real question is okay, what does Public Works want to do with that? And who on Public Works is going to take that information, and what decisions, what are they actually going to do that's different when they have that? Because it's something I'm vaguely aware that this is a buzzword that a lot of people like to use to talk about smart cities, but data doesn't make you smart unless you actually have a good idea of what the context is and how you're going to use it. And so I'm sorry, that's a little bit of a tirade though.
No, that's good. That's good.
It's reasonable.
I got to the 3rd paragraph here and I skipped it because of its first sentence. So, that's where I'm coming from. If I see smarter in quotes, I'm done with what it says.
Right.
As far as I can tell in this part, they use the phrase cognitive solutions. Sorry, I don't have a very low tolerance.
Paradigm shift.
I'm sure that there are communities that do cool stuff with this, and if you go to Worcester, we got a tour of Worcester, and that was weird but also cool. But they have a data team that's 2 or 3 people, and those 2 or 3 people do a lot of really interesting stuff to sort of get a sense of like where are things going with these things, and it helps inform decisions that are made at the executive level. But we are a
What are they using?
well, the state, yeah, and I'm actually part of the Massachusetts State Data Center, but like, but I have to say like. That is one thing for the second largest city in the Commonwealth to do, and the big question is like, okay, so say that we do this stuff, like who's going to use it? That being said, if there was something really cool that in some way could take advantage of a fiber network that currently would be more difficult, it's right here.
I'm still wondering what they're looking at. I mean, what is the team taking in? What are they looking at? What are they doing?
You're talking about
Worcester, yeah, specifically Worcester.
Yeah, off the top of my head.
You don't remember, okay.
I had talked to somebody over the summer who was involved, and they were selling smart city stuff, you know. But
Yeah.
and he was telling me about some of the things that they've done where they've installed air quality like sensors at various points throughout like cities, and you know that would detect any contaminants that might come into play, or you know if they have pollution. But this seemed really like it was really geared toward, like you said, big cities like that might have smog issues and things like that. I'm not really sure how applicable it was to Easthampton, but I guess maybe some.
And you could have detected that gas leak. That pretty much anyone who walks by it could also detect. But
Well, right, but the gas company should be doing that. I mean, no, I mean, look, if there's some, like, you know, if there's some technology that actually could be really useful, that could plug into the network, great. But until I have, like, a really concrete example, it's just not something that I would want to use as part of, like, you know, if I'm here, like, obviously I'm a proponent of this, you know, on the council and whatever, and I'm not gonna, like, if I'm pitching it on its value, that we're keeping money local in the community, that we're providing better, like, services to the community, that we're, like, we're more attractive to businesses and to residents. Like, the fact that we could plug some sensors into it and figure out how many cars went down East Street today, like, okay, that's neat, but
It's not a selling point.
Don't we already get that from Web Tactics? Don't we get their camera feed right on Main Street?
yeah, I think there might be a couple of those throughout town, but like, yeah, I don't know.
But, I mean, it might be useful, for example, to have the city water department be able to put sensors on everyone's water meter in their house, and it, you know, quickly spot water contamination, you know, stuff like that. That could be a citywide, very useful kind of technology.
yeah, that would be it.
I'm gonna say that
Contamination from what? From
yeah.
From the flow of water into the house, not what it's doing in the pipes, but what it's doing as it's coming into each house.
Doesn't the Massachusetts water quality, you'd think?
I mean, one thing that is I do feel like we're kind of straying from discussing the report.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So, yeah, I mean, this is interesting because it's a little briefer than I thought it would be.
Well,
no, this is cut down.
I took out tons of
Right,
pages.
but you know, still 37 pages.
Right. I was like, oh, yeah.
I mean, I guess the big question is, you know, it's sort of tying into the next agenda item. So I'm hoping we can sort of go back and forth and discuss these little like have a little flexibility with that.
Yeah, I think
Is really like, is this the sort of report that we want to put on the mayor's table, or are we thinking something a little bit different? And what sorts of elements from this should we be replicating, and what do we not need, and what isn't here that we should be putting?
Yeah.
My immediate response is it needs an executive summary. So,
Which is in there, yeah.
which, I mean, basically says what it says in a few bullet points that covers this much, and then
Yeah.
you can go dig in for the details.
think we need to include a lot like the presentation from Sheld that had that. Here's the state of the infrastructure in the Pioneer Valley and in the greater Western Mass area right now. Some kind of map and some kind of highlight.
Our report now, or are we talking about this?
I think we're talking about what our report might look like, correct?
When I looked at this document, I was thinking about it in the context of this is a starting point template for our own outline.
Yeah.
More so than the contents of it. 'Cause
Right.
as soon as I got to cognitive solutions or whatever.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Robust, affordable
That's it, I
infrastructure.
agree with Patricia. I think we need some synopsis up front, like I was thinking maybe just to, maybe the history of the committee in a paragraph or two.
Do you want me to
Yeah.
whiteboard stuff while
yeah.
you guys are talking?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna do any like what's the stuff that CETA does. I'm not doing that.
Okay.
I've actually been thinking about this most of the afternoon. I was thinking from there we could segue into when we get Jason and get caught up, the other utilities that we've talked to.
Yeah.
And then the various business models or rollout models that we would have, whether we do it all ourselves, or whether we have a turnkey solution from somebody else or something
Right.
in the middle.
Which is basically
Could you-
6.2 in
Yeah.
this report here. Is a
What were you
template of
saying?
that.
Synopsis of the current.
Basically, the committee in a paragraph or two when we formed,
Okay.
and, what our mission is, whatever,
Well, I was thinking more of a summary covering what we're going to tell you. I mean, the bullet point thing that you read through quickly to understand what you've got on your desk, and then
Right. Oh, yeah, right.
Yes,
That's that.
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
TLDR.
Okay, I've gone
Yeah.
past what you were
Yes,
talking
exactly.
about, so that's good, yep.
Which is
All right.
very accurate, I think.
After that, Jason, I was going to talk about
This is a lot. If
visiting with Greenfield
if
and
your time
Westfield,
is stressed like everyone is.
And my other thought today, go ahead, Greenfield, Holyoke, and,
Holyoke,
and Greenfield.
Greenfield, and South Hadley.
Greenfield, South Hadley.
Westfield, gas and electric.
Okay.
Right.
Greenfield.
I think for now, we can treat South Hadley and Holyoke as pretty much the same thing, as far as the relationship.
Yeah.
And then finally, the types of ways we'd roll this thing out, whether it would be a turnkey operation, we'd do it all in-house, or a
Like
combination
the models
of the
we've
two.
seen.
Yeah, based on the talks we've had.
Here they call it
Things.
business and operational model.
Okay.
So are we,
So
then
that's just my ideas about where this can go, and now we can beat it up or add to it.
yeah, because there's really basically there's three models that we've looked at, which is either we do it all in house,
Right.
we partner with another municipality or another MLP,
Right.
or we do a public-private partnership.
Right.
Is there any? There's no other model that we've really looked at, right?
I think
No.
There's the wait for Elon Musk Starlink model.
Oh. But I mean, I guess
AKA the decide not to
Yeah.
proceed with a,
There's nothing that we talked about. I did see, so I put in here, and this is further back. This starts on page 33, where they have, quote, different models. And one that we didn't really talk about is just being an infrastructure provider, where essentially we are just wiring up dark fiber, but allowing other companies.
Yes. Wilbraham, I think, was gonna do something like that. I don't know if they ever went through with it. But yeah, that is true. We should throw
finish
that
your
up.
thought, allow other companies to do what? Yeah.
So we would basically, like as an infrastructure provider, we would not manage or supply any lit services. It would just be straight dark fiber,
Yeah.
but allowing other companies to use that fiber to offer their services.
I guess that's a model. What's the benefit?
Well, the benefit is what you can basically do at that point is any ISP in the world
Right.
can deliver internet to any house along your fiber. So the idea is that I think that the people who like this idea, I guess there's a couple things. First of all, once you've got the fiber up, you've really just got to maintain the fiber at that point. But you're not. There's not much staffing because you're not really doing like a lot of this stuff.
The ISPs will be responsible.
Own the infrastructure and allow ISPs
Yeah,
access.
Yeah.
Right.
So the
we can
ISPs would basically just do the final connection out to the house, and we would have everything to that point.
No,
or
all
some-
they do just the service and maintenance and billing.
So we still have to do all
Yeah,
that
you'd
stuff.
still do all the
So
physical,
there's
but
still
that's it.
quite a bit
Yeah.
of
But they
overhead
could
there.
that company potentially be the same company that sets up the infrastructure, like does the cabling?
Yeah, but
does the
then we're
wiring,
getting
does
back
all
into
the-
one of the first business,
I mean-
first model that we were talking about.
We should actually
Yeah.
discuss this model probably as a separate.
It might be, I mean, I see where that would
Yeah.
maybe open up competition.
That's
but
the
I
idea.
don't-
is
Right,
that
that's the idea.
But
it's-
we lose all control on this thing, and we still have to put a lot of, the investment up front, or take a lot of responsibility
Yeah.
up front. It doesn't seem like a
I
really
think
good
that was
idea to me.
something like, which
That would work,
private ones,
again, the
after
scale,
20
in New York
years, we
City.
could buy they'd amortize it over
Yeah,
20
yeah.
years,
Right.
and
Yeah.
then, you know,
I think-
buy it at the end.
That this kind of model, I think, is a fit for those communities who really want to have something for the business customers who want this badly
Right.
and can really pay a good chunk of money for it.
Larger communities too.
I mean, and I think some people like this idea because.
They don't want the government doing it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it minimizes the actual role that the municipal government has to just maintaining the infrastructure and connecting people to the
What
infrastructure.
happens if charter bids?
Yeah, they can.
Of course.
Yep,
They can
do
supply-
their service right
I
over.
mean, because it's not like.
I rest my case.
Well, no, but that's the thing is that it's not. So the way that this works when it does is that like no one's bidding for sole exclusive use of the
Right.
infrastructure. So if Charter wants to provide internet over the fiber, then they can. And if Comcast or some random small
Right.
place wants to do it, they can. And they'd be subject to certain terms.
I think a
I'm-
decent analogy is the way that you can pick your supplier for electricity.
Sure.
It's all coming over the same infrastructure, but you're deciding. That's kind of a similar idea.
I just want to point out really quickly that this is super interesting. It's not actually on our agenda, so we should.
It is a review of the Northampton
Yeah,
study.
Oh, yeah, no, actually, okay, yeah, fair enough, fair
Go
enough.
on.
Okay.
What isn't the outline?
No, it's right here, the Northampton feasibility study.
Yeah, but isn't there some?
The outline's
the
also
next
on
one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That-
No, the
and
outline.
he said that and
Yeah.
then segue into our report, because I had mentioned we should probably start outlining
Yeah.
the report
Yeah.
next week.
Right.
So
next
as
week.
far as the comparison to the electric utility situation, regardless of who you're buying the power from, there's only one company that's responsible for getting it to your house.
Right.
With this other scenario that we spoke about, if somebody all of a sudden has no signal at their house, it's his fault,
Well, it would ultimately still be.
because there are too many players.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so, and this is the one thing, I don't actually, whenever, I've had a couple conversations with fiber, about fiber, just out in the world, and people said, it would be really cool if something like this. And, the appeal is, like, there are clear appeals. I'm not aware of any community that does this. Like, it's something that I think, like, there are some people who do it. And so that would be the next question. If we want to include that, and I think it's a good point. We probably should include it in the report. But the thing that immediately comes to mind is,
Who's doing this?
yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Where is it?
like where's because maybe there's places that have done it and it's great and it's super lean and you have like a MLP with like 2 maintenance guys who hook stuff up, and other than that you're just collecting fees to use it, and
Right.
it's just maybe it's great.
This leads to a question which kind of encompasses the whole report. Do we make recommendations in this report? Like which of these 4 models we think would work best for Easthampton?
Yeah.
Is that
I think
best
that
left to...
When we're writing the report,
We definitely can, right?
we can discuss that and we can take we
Then I
can.
say we
yeah.
include all the players.
I think that it's we can say or we can even say like, we like these ideas and we're nervous about this, but it has some potential. Like, we can be as nuanced as we want. We just, the final report, we've got to vote to accept it.
Right. I don't think that we should say this is the way that we see it and that's the only
Right.
way, but
No.
to say, here's approaches that we like for these
We like
reasons.
this approach for the exact, yes.
And
We
it
do
would
include
be,
the survey and the survey data.
Yeah, that should definitely,
Absolutely, that should be in
that could be an appendix maybe.
Or, no, I mean, even the
We can
field
just throw up
visits.
ideas and then we
Yeah.
can organize
Yeah.
it.
I think the survey and then the public meeting after that, although we didn't get a lot of feedback from
Responding to the
people.
questions that were brought up.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah,
That should
I
definitely
think
be
it's
said.
worth mentioning that.
absolutely. I think that it would be good to have. I mean, I think it's sort of in there at the. I think it would be good to have like pretty early on a primer on what the current market is in Easthampton, and in particular that like. Just since the public will, this it's going to the mayor and the city council, but the public will have access to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Like, one of the first questions we had to ask ourselves when we formed as a committee was, can we even do this? Or is there like a legal monopoly? And if we do want to do this, what do we have to do? Well, we have to form an MLP. And
Right.
Yeah,
83% of the people vote.
actually, and I think it's, I think that if we do form an MLP, and like we have the legal authority to have a public monopoly.
Right, but then also like, okay, so from there, if we like also say like, so if we were to put fiber on the poles, like we would then have to we'd have to pay a lease to the pole owners, and there would have to be a make ready, and the make ready is a really one of the big like cost components, because that's where we run into like we might have to pay people to move their lines so that we have enough space.
Right.
Just sort of recapping
extend the
everything that
length of
we've
the
discussed.
So
Well,
logistical
poll survey.
status
Basically,
and
that would come
background
under the
and-
poll survey.
Right.
Well, on the MLP, you also want to mention that the city voted over 4-1, I
Yeah.
believe, or
Yeah,
5-1 in
so-
favor of this.
We can put a status of legal status.
did you say something about that, like specific margin of victory being particularly notable
Oh, it was
Pioneer
a
Valley scale?
rout. I don't like. I mean, there was it was over 80%
It was
of
81%,
Right.
yeah.
Like, so, and it included like, even like even the parts of the city where all the other ballot questions just got crushed, it still won. Like, it was really, there was no precinct that it won by like less than a 10-point margin. It was don't quote me on that, but it was something like that. It was just like there's clearly some so there's something there to be said for like, how do the voters feel about this? Well, they feel kind of positive.
Want to review any potential funding sources?
Yeah, I was gonna.
That was
The next thing I was gonna say is the whole
finance.
section needs to be financial.
Yeah, and financial options, whatever, yeah.
I saw, did anybody see those stories about Whip City getting all that money? Was it from
Yeah.
the state? They got a
Yeah.
bunch of money, or federal, to help other towns do the
Right.
last mile stuff?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, we should go over that and we should review it, and we should also make sure in that process, because again, this is supposed to be educational, that people understand that a lot of the funding that has been available to other communities will not be available here,
Right.
because we have an incumbent high-speed internet provider, and so there's some stuff that might just not be usable for us that has been for other people.
Right.
Anything else in this section?
The only other thing that's been mentioned by the people we've talked to is the fees, what is property tax, how do they do that?
Oh, there was someone who suggested that they do it. Okay, so as like improvement districts.
Right, but if
Or
it's
improvement
attached, I thought the
Oh,
property tax
wasn't
or
that-
something like that, yeah.
Like the mayor wanted to put it into didn't she put it in our original recommendation letter that Greg read? Did they put that into a bid? Was it the Cottage Street or?
Oh, well, so there are things like that, but this was like technically in Massachusetts, like a neighborhood can vote to like increase their property taxes to like fix up their sidewalks or do other projects like
Right.
that. We've never done that to my knowledge in Easthampton.
Yeah.
But that guy who came in from Matrix One.
Matrix, yeah, he's the
Yeah.
first one who mentioned it.
He was the one who had mentioned that that was one way you could do it, is to basically set up fiber hoods as
Right.
improvement districts where your taxes would go up to.
We should put
But it
it
would
on
only
the
be the taxes
list
of that
and
district.
get
Of that
the
district,
details
yeah.
on it. I
Weird.
think like the
If they're getting a
fourth model there, it's
$700
probably
tax
not gonna
increase, you think
fly,
I'd be
but we
voting for
wanna
more
include
taxes?
everything.
Let's do our homework on this a little bit, huh?
Yeah, I don't.
I don't think
feel like
anyone
that's
here wants to raise
politically,
property
that's
taxes.
No, it's, and it probably won't fly, but like with the other issue there where we have the fourth model, we should put this on there. and
Absolutely.
so
I
then
totally
when we
agree.
make things at the end conclusions, it's like, this probably isn't what we recommend. you know?
Right, but I definitely like think it's valuable to just like, if there's a
Yeah.
thing like a strategy or a
Yeah.
tool, I want to just make sure that that's passed on
Yeah.
so that we're not like be like, oh, we forgot to tell you about this, but there's actually something that really specifically solves the thing that you're dealing with.
Also, when you're making a recommendation like this, it's good to put
Yeah.
options that you don't
Right.
like as a
Well,
contrast to the ones
In
that
light
you do
of,
like.
in light of the new tax bills that showed up last week, the town's gonna be hypersensitive
Yeah.
about the bonding
So
issue for
we
a
just need to be
while. Yeah.
we just need to be thoughtful about how we word some of
Yeah.
that, but it's fine. Let's see, what else is in this report that there's like, is there anything?
There's something
But I
else
think
that
what we can't lose sight of, Kevin, is that this is a revenue generating project,
Right.
whereas
Yeah.
Yep,
the school is not revenue generating in,
Oh, absolutely.
in the
Yeah.
strict sense of the word.
But I think we have to be careful and say potentially revenue generating.
Yes.
yeah.
Well, it's
well, if
Well,
we're gonna be revenue
the thing we haven't
generating,
talked about here
It
is
just
that
may
we
not
roll
be
it out
positive.
a neighborhood at a
Right,
time.
right.
We bond for the first neighborhood, I'm
Right,
just talking
exactly.
off the top of my head, and then when that thing is online and producing revenue, we don't have to bond as much.
Right.
It
And
should
so
all
Would you
be
go
discussed.
through as a recommendation, like a
department is
potential
revenue
rollout,
generating.
like, oh, here's what other communities have
Yeah,
done.
like
This is
rollout
here's-
strategies, yeah.
Divide up into fiber hoods, look
Exactly,
at the early
yeah.
adopters, roll it out.
This is an outline, so once we get an outline, people are gonna start adding bullet items
Yeah.
to the various categories.
Another thing, so rollout strategies seems like that's an important thing. And for some places, like, I mean, when we spoke to Greenfield, like, they were like, we have our core, and then there's like a lot of sort of X or like really very not at all dense like areas outside there, and they were like, and we have no idea when those are gonna get done because it's not
Yeah,
profitable.
right.
And so like,
I thought Easthampton's geography though, and how interesting it was to the South Hadley group.
Yeah,
you know,
because it's very
because we
dense.
really are. We are an
Yeah.
easy town to wire. You
Yeah.
know, that's the way they see it.
Do you want to, once we get through the rollout section, or like, here's the first, here's the startup phase, and then 'cause people are then going to ask, what about the maintenance phase? What about after everything's done? How are you going to protect this asset and take
I
care
might
of
be
it?
going a little bit off topic here, but when I heard about the backbone running up Route 10 and up 141, I mean, does that solve some of our cabling problems, depending on access into that thing?
No,
Because-
I think it solves more of our resilience problems than cabling problems.
Resilience, how so?
well, if a tree knocks out one of them.
Oh, okay. But if that stuff is already there and we can somehow wire into it, then it's gonna save us, because I don't know if anybody else has been looking around, but I've been looking at the poles. And most of the poles, there's plenty of room up on them everywhere in town. East Street has plenty of room, yet the two streets that don't have any room are 141 and Route 10. Yeah, so it's an interesting thought, if we already have existing cable up there and we don't have to run the cable, just put some hardware here.
well, we'd have to pay presumably Crown
Oh,
Council
yeah,
or whatever.
yeah.
So it would be
Yeah.
some sort of a license
I
agreement.
just like have a thoughtful day sitting around
Yeah,
the
but-
house.
Yeah.
Yeah, the ring like that they're talking about building
Right.
really applies, I think, more to backhaul than to house connections.
That was the sense I got too, but what do I know?
Yeah.
But
Me
it
too.
gives us, it might give us access points is what I'm saying, that we don't have to run cable all up and down Route 10 and 141.
Yeah, and that, I think that's a cost benefit thing that.
Right,
that-
it's just
We
something that we
should
should be
definitely look
thinking
at it,
about.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
All right.
That might be a good specific question and a follow-up with the Shelled people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is like, what would the costs of leasing is it Crown Castle, am I saying that right?
Yeah.
What would the costs of Crown Castle leasing ongoing be in comparison to the make ready and fiber and stringing and.
And would they even
along
be
those routes?
okay with us?
Would it even- yeah, is it
like,
even
that
an option?
option?
Sure.
Like,
Right.
you know, that cable runs directly in front of my house. If I wanted to call up Comcast and be like, hey, could you just splice that and like, is that, and can we get that? And anyway, yeah, I don't know.
Right.
Running a ring like that, the odds are that they have multiple fibers in there.
Right.
Yes, oh, I'm sure.
And they could say, okay, you can use this fiber out of the bundle.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, that's something we'd have to chat with them about.
Yeah.
Another thing that we should probably have in our primer is like, what the existing infrastructure looks like.
Yeah,
So in terms of like
FCF, not just the pole survey, but what we already have in
Like
place.
what we
for
already
hardware
know,
and
like-
fiber, yeah.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Dark fiber
Yeah.
the dark fiber and the Mass Broadband Institute fiber and like just like what's already there, what do we have access to?
Not only, I mean, that would be useful to everybody else, but I still don't understand half of that stuff, so
you
it'd
wanna
be
make
really
it-
nice to, nail this down for everyone.
Have a section on residential versus business service, or, I mean, is that?
I mean,
those
I
two
think we
things
can,
have different requirements and.
I think we're talking residential, aren't we, right now?
Well-
And that's our focus, but we should at least mention business.
That's, I mean, I think we.
I think, isn't
we've
the
never
only
made
difference
that
really like
distinction.
a service level agreement?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think that right now, it would be, here's where it could be useful to discuss this, right? Is that right now, Westfield really isn't focusing on businesses at all. I mean,
Right.
they'll hook people up if they like come after them, and that's not their target. Or at least that's what I took away from our meeting with them.
That's pretty much the way I remember it.
And then Holyoke is specifically
The other way,
targeting
business,
businesses and is
right.
not even attempting to go after residential.
Yeah.
And so we could say like, these aren't necessarily, like we don't necessarily, but I've always sort of thought, and maybe this is an assumption, but I've always thought that the mood of this committee is that we're hoping to do everything.
Both. Well, if it's as simple
think
as a
they're very
service
different.
agreement, like Dan just said,
Yes.
we can proceed down the path, and focus on whatever looks the most attractive, which is obviously residential, but
Yeah.
most of the infrastructure will be there, and then we can make the pitch to business when we're ready to do it, so.
yeah, and I think business customers would be mostly into it. My very limited understanding of that kind of distinction is that an SLA is really just a liability kind of thing, and it's a sort of like, if the service doesn't meet these performance metrics, then you get your money back, more or less.
Right.
It's a guarantee.
It's also when you call tech support, if it's, I mean, and they use the outage level but to escalate the.
Right.
yeah.
And I
What
guess
your priority is.
I guess the
Yeah.
important piece here would be to communicate to the decision makers that, this is residential business, we totally could do. It would probably involve this one extra step, but it also could potentially lead to, people who are paying more money, so
Right.
it could be a good thing.
In Boston, the difference between residential and business is the amount of time before you have to repair an outage by the FCC.
And there's also like guaranteed bandwidth versus like shared bandwidth.
Right. So I think it would be important that the mayor and the council understand that, like, I mean, first of all, that there's some huge upsides to including business customers, because that's actually like potentially like people could choose to locate their business here
Right.
because they get access to certain services. But also, these are clients that are going to expect a different level of responsiveness than your average household.
And that's already on your radar with the Ferry Street project anyway, because I think that would be mixed residential and commercial, or is that all residential?
It's going to be mixed.
Okay, cool.
So something that I thought was interesting here, maybe we talked about this a long time ago. It's on page 30 if you're following, but it says here that once the city has the use of the poles for municipal use, but once it begins to operate as a utility, then it must enter a standard carrier attachment agreement. And as part of this, there's a fee that's determined and regulated by the Massachusetts Department of Telecommunications and Cable, which right now, or at least at the time of this writing, was $14 a pole per year.
Wow.
I just found that I wasn't aware of that personally, but it does say here that it wouldn't have to be for all of the poles that the fiber is carried on, only the poles which are providing service to an end customer.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So if there's a pole
When
with
you're doing
no
a
how,
drop
like
to a customer?
As in a drop.
Yeah,
So only drop poles
yeah.
pay that fee.
but in Easthampton that would be virtually every pole, right?
Yeah.
I mean, how many poles are there that like? I mean, I guess if you go out to like
There's plenty of poles that don't have drops.
Right.
I guess if you get out to like,
And on line, like out towards Line Street.
yeah, that there might be like multiple poles in between houses, but like in my neighborhood, there's multiple houses in between poles. Like,
Right.
I'm gonna probably write this all down unless somebody else is gonna capture this.
I can take a picture of it and share it with the group. If you want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have
And
to
I'll probably write it down in shorthand and then, then we'll talk after. Okay, sorry.
Now, this is an interesting concept. Is this why Greenfield went with wireless from the pole? Because it's not a drop per se?
It wasn't for this reason. I think it was just the cost of
Yeah.
installing the physical cable to the house.
We should make sure that we
This is an
do bring
additional
that up
cost.
with Greenfield.
Yeah.
Or Greenfield versus Westfield.
But I don't know.
Those two models, like,
Yeah.
It could be once you put the transmitter up,
You don't have to
you
pay this?
may have to pay the same fee to put the transmitter on the fiber.
Yeah.
but you can, per pole, you can maybe serve, what did they say, 8 to 10 houses or something like that, or per?
I thought each
The
transmitter
transmitter.
was locked to the receiver in the house.
Well, I think you can serve multiple homes from
Yes, they
one.
said that,
From one
Okay.
I think up
Okay.
to 4, I think it was up to
Was it up to
4.
4?
from,
I thought it was more
Okay.
than that.
They might be.
Seems-
Okay.
Yeah.
There was some factor too.
I think we should probably make sure to include a section about, I don't know, risks, I guess I'd call them, and bring up like, for example, like, competition is obviously the biggest risk, right? Like, people always ask about 5G, so we should have a section discussing the conversations we've had about 5G.
Risks are like upcoming technologies or something?
Sure, or like
competing
what if,
technologies?
like, the incumbent provider could slash their cost in half for 5 years in hopes of retaining customers, and what does that look like? These are the things that people are gonna, did you think this through? So,
Right, because didn't South have this as soon as they introduced, or as soon as Westfield, like the Comcast will definitely lower rates as soon as
Yeah.
they introduce it, as will Charter, would just.
yeah, no, they'll definitely.
Well,
get
and,
it.
and there's also the argument that, all right, that gives the residents cheaper internet.
Yeah.
And
Right.
and our purpose is not to get the other companies out of the way. It's just to benefit the citizens.
Sure, but if we're bonding for
Yeah.
millions and millions of
Yeah.
dollars, then, you
Yeah,
know,
that's true.
that is the big one, is that needs to get paid back. We have a
Yeah.
pretty good credit rating right now, and I'd
So,
like to keep it that way.
so to that point, there's also something else in here that kind of made me think of something. This is right here, it's on page 7 here, but it says if private partners want to construct and own fiber extensions, private partners that will be physically interconnected into the city's municipal fiber networks, methods to establish meet me or other formal points of interconnect demarcation can be established. And it alludes to the 1996 Telecom Act that there are numerous processes and procedures for enabling such interconnection between parties. And it made me think, if an MLP is, taking out the money to, host the servers and buy the equipment and wire, a certain part of the town or even main poles throughout the town, and maybe a partnered LLC is formed which would take out money or to service the, to the home, then it may limit the liability of the municipality financially.
Well, and I think that it's actually like required that the MLP be a separate entity, and then the finances of the MLP not be tied to the town.
You're right.
But the only way we could, I think they discussed this last time, the only way the MLP has no credit rating and has no credit history, the only way to do it would be to get some guarantee from the city and that for repayment.
Right.
Until you establish an MLP with like a 10-year revenue history.
Is your goal here to have taxpayers not be on the hook for some sort of default? Is that?
Well, it may be a way to limit the total money that would be at stake for the taxpayers in the event that we would pursue a partnership, like a public-private partnership type arrangement, where we would have a private partner who would be an LLC, which would be responsible for a certain portion of the cost using this type of arrangement, where we say, okay, we're responsible up to this point, and that's our financial obligation, and then this LLC has a financial obligation for this rest of this point, and they've formed a Meet Me network, and so.
And that would be we would build in the densest areas and they would cover the less dense areas?
There could be different ways to work it. We could build, like veins,
That's
through
an
the city
interesting.
that could then be attached to by a private partner and expanded into neighborhoods.
Has anyone ever done that? I'd be interested in seeing.
Well, there's a major Meet Me room in downtown Crossing. It's one of the biggest in the country. And so, for example, when I was at Broad, we wanted to get onto Internet 2 for scientific research transmissions. And so we had to run run fiber down to that Meet Me room where we hopped onto Harvard's Internet 2 connection and various other connections as well. So my guess is that the closest significant Meet Me room now would be that big data center in Holyoke.
Interesting.
But there may be Meet Me rooms on the college campuses as well, because I'm sure UMass is on Internet 2 as well, for example.
I'd be interested in discussing that, I guess, further. I'm not sure I entirely get it right now, but
I get it, but I don't quite understand the incentive for a private entity to want to do that. Because essentially they're taking on sort of the highest risk and the lowest revenue aspects.
I guess my big question
maybe.
is like,
That might be fair.
I guess my question is, are we sure this falls under the outline planning? It sounds like that's like a new.
Well, it came right out of this. This is what-
Oh yeah. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. That's. Yeah. Well, I mean. Okay. That's kind of an interesting idea.
Now, it may be that sort of arrangement maybe would make sense in a place with really high density, like in a real big city, where like there's thousands and thousands of subscribers in this neighborhood that they could access.
Yeah. On the other hand, if South Hadley is in fact going to build this, Pioneer Valley ring, there may be people that are attached to that ring that have need to get on the mass broadband that's running down the turnpike to Boston. And if we can provide that access for them, that's a big income to us without major expense on our part.
It's true. So, I know it's not totally fleshed out, concept right now, but it's something that I saw and was like an interesting little wrinkle that we hadn't really considered.
Okay. What have we studied so far that's not up here? Like, what's information that we've discussed so far? Or is this
Well, we did discuss kind of just the different technologies and the benefits of what fiber has over the coax.
Yeah,
That should be in the early part of the
Primer
report, I
on?
think.
yeah, technologies.
Primer on technologies and why we like fiber, or maybe we just save that for the conclusion.
Yeah.
I think that that's probably one we've been like that we've written that in things that we've already voted on, like communications. That we say out of everything, fiber's what we like the most. Like that with the thing that we submitted to.
Ties into risks though. I mean, I kind of brought up Starlink as a joke, but it's I feel like it exists in the same category as 5G, where it's that is the sort of mid to long term risk of that technology sort of invalidating or undermining the value of this potential infrastructure. I think we're all in agreement. But what we've learned that short term, that's not really a risk at all, or at least not a big one. But like midterm, like 5G could revolutionize. It could be there's very little demand for fiber, or once the satellites are going and it works, if it works, like.
We had discussed earlier the potential of having a fiber network that then the 5G companies could potentially use, but did South Hadley, do I remember South Hadley kind of shooting that idea down and being like, they're not gonna...
Tim's not a big fan of 5G. He shot it down when we met with him in
But I remember him saying, or what was his, I'm sorry, I'm blanking on his name, who was here from Shell.
Sean
Sean was saying,
yeah, Tim was the Holyoke guy. Yeah.
Sean was saying, he's like, they're probably not going to, if I remember correctly, like, probably not going to do that. They're big into owning the infrastructure.
Westfield said the same thing.
I think he said that about Verizon.
Yeah.
Now, is Verizon going to be the only player in the 5G world? Is it possible that other people are going to be more? I mean, I don't know. It's tough to say. And will 5G ever reach
smaller
Easthampton?
We should have.
No, but that goes into the technological overview and speaks to risks as well.
Yeah, from the 5G.
I'm just because like what I'd really like to do is, I mean, it's up to you, all of course, but like. What I think it might be a good idea is to start breaking this out and start writing.
Yes. We're gonna fill in a lot of gaps, right?
And when as we're writing and reviewing and going through this, we can continue to look into like, oh, I just heard about this. Let's bring someone in. Let's talk about it. Whatever. We can add sections.
I have everything on the board here, and you're going to take a picture so Jason and I can knock this outline together, distribute it to everybody, and at that point we can assign, or do we, or do we jump the gun?
We just want to take like these starts.
I think it makes sense to have individuals start
picking off. I think so too. Yeah. Good. All right.
And then I think the one thing. That we will have to say from here is to talk about the work that I should have said this before Jason started pictures.
Go!
You ready? You're the new editor.
Nice.
Contract employee.
I think that there's one section where we could say, like, if we wanted to go forward with this, here are the things that the city would need to do next. Like,
Yes.
Yeah.
next steps.
Next steps.
It could it could be as simple as that, but that's really like what, like if for the, like, in the executive summary sense, like what would the mayor and the city council have to do to establish a municipal light plant? What does a board look like for a municipal light plant?
Right.
How does one bond for such a thing if they chose to do so? Oh yeah, business plan. Like they were saying, they're like, well, the first thing you need to do is actually get like a pro forma business plan. Well, we're not people who do business plans.
No.
So at some point they're going to have to, I mean,
Bring the consultants.
they're going to have to bring in some sort of outside.
Yeah.
I mean, we can say, here's structurally, this is what this looks like, and other communities have been really successful with it, but like, there's no way that anyone's like, that we're, I mean, or maybe this is something I guess we have to keep talking about, but like, presumably no one's bonding for millions of dollars without a sense of like,
No.
what does that actually look like?
You can't get the bond. You can't do a bond. You can't even do it.
So there'd have to be some sort of feasibility study that shows that even with whatever interest rates we're going to be looking at and the pole rental fees, which are extra costs that other communities don't have, that our density and
I don't think feasibility study is right, because I think this is closer to a feasibility study. I think you're talking about a pro forma business plan.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's what they were saying.
Tangible.
But a lot of that stuff that's in the pro forma business plan, competitive landscape, all those I mean, we're kind of writing sections that we can cannibalize
Yeah.
later.
right, and so there's a lot of this that they could play into,
Yeah.
and plus that, I mean, I've personally felt, I don't know, but like one thing that I know a lot of those sort of business plans look at is they do a lot of sort of market research, polling, stuff like that, to say that here's what we're estimating your take rate would be.
Right.
We have a electorate that just overwhelmingly voted for this, and we have a number of communities that are very socioeconomically similar to us
Right.
in the area that have take rates of one thing or another.
Right.
And I think between those, we could, I mean, that's going to give us as good of an idea of what our take rate would look like as any survey research would, and it would probably cut the cost of a study in half.
I mean, the survey data will give us at least the beginnings of, once we can get out the address information of potential early adopters, even though
Right.
it's not a scientific study by any means. It does give us a sense of like, here are hot spots in town where we've got potentially a lot of people. Here's
So this next steps to do it for Easthampton section, how does that play with the conclusions thing that I was talking about? Do we at the end say this is, our conclusions for, or how?
I think it's part of the conclusion.
Maybe I
think
would
so.
do.
I think they kind of, when you started explaining what you're at, I'm like, this sounds like a conclusions plan if we do it
I think
properly.
conclusion generally is a little
Right.
more high-level overview of like,
Right.
these are our overall recommendations.
Yeah.
But then the next steps is tangibly,
Right.
if you like these
Then
recommendations,
this is what we need to
this
do.
is what
So
we need to do
did the
next.
conclusion
A, B,
first and then
Yeah.
segue into
Yeah.
this is how we roll it out.
I don't know if
Okay,
we need to discuss it, but I think some of the survey data goes against maybe what some of our, at least some of the things that we've studied so far about fiber being, the cost of fiber per, like what Westfield is charging, cuts against what the survey data tells us about what people think they should pay or want to pay. I mean, overwhelmingly people wanted affordable internet. I mean,
Right. Right.
$69 for a gig is super affordable when you look at what the cost is, but is more than maybe some people are paying now.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
$40 for,
Yeah, people want basically $35 internet, or
Right.
that's what.
Well,
Well,
and
the
that's,
tier, we should mention
And
the
then
tiered
that's where
service thing too, that should be on there.
But then you get into
I like
looking
that.
at models like Greenfields, and they're paying. They have
They
it on
have
here.
free tier.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and their closest approximation to, I think their highest was 250,
Right.
and I think that's $70. Whereas
Right.
in Westfield you get a gig of dedicated.
Right.
And I think the real thing that I took away from that in the survey was that the people who say, oh, well, we're going to give you this really fancy, really great internet, and it's going to cost $100 a month, well, that might not actually work for a lot of people. We have to be price competitive in the long run. In the short run, they're going to undercut, right? Why wouldn't they? They think about how much money they probably have just like in cash sitting in some like offshore. I don't know. Like I mean, a big corporation like that has tons of cash. They can afford to take a loss for.
But we're also gonna, let's say this thing all pans out and we have this MLP that starts to roll it out, you're probably gonna have a pretty long line to wait in to get this service if you were suddenly like, hey, everybody sign up to get this drop to your home. I mean, I don't know how many drops a crew could do a day, but there would be a rush to get them, and I presume there would be a pretty long waiting list. So those people could benefit from that by re-upping with.
That's the experience in Westfield and South Hadley, South Hadley.
You've brought up a question that I haven't had answered by any of our people who have come in yet, which is there a cost-effective way to do lower speed, inexpensive access?
Sounds like it costs them the same,
South Hadley,
regardless.
yeah.
You know?
That's the general thing that I'm getting. But like,
So here's my logic around this, and tell me if.
and I understand the cost of the drop, but
Right, is the vast majority of the cost of this service is the cost of the make ready and the cost of the drop. And beyond that, you've got the cost of maintaining the lines, whether you're getting fast or slow internet. If a tree goes down and they have to fix it.
no, I know, I know all this. But what I don't understand on a technical level is the provisioning and the
throttling of the service.
and like how the individual strands and the different
That explains
wavelengths
giving
on
away
per
the hardware
strand.
and other things. If they're gonna go with that business model, then they have to be charging you not a premier amount, but enough that they get that money back. So offering a low cost, thing, I mean, people could jump on that and still get the same level of service, and then do the old switcheroo. I can see why they're against that.
I think that it's not like the lower cost really. It's not really like you can have a lower cost. Like sure that slightly higher bandwidth. Cable does cost a little bit more, but it's
South Hadley.
No, I think the cost is in just maintaining the idea of product lines and like distinguishing.
Well, that's what South Hadley mentioned last week.
like, keep it
Because
simple.
there's levels of support, there's just levels of overhead, so they like to have the one smooth. This is the one that one size fits all.
So I like the non-tiered approach personally.
See, I like the tiered approach, but the more I hear about it, the more I realize that's just because I'm a cheap old man.
But it doesn't sound like there's any real. The only distinction is in the marketing and how the technology behind it is the same. It's not like you're really getting the same pipe.
It creates
to
more
your
knowledge.
house. I just don't know.
Remember when Matrix came in and talked about their backhaul? And they were talking about 10 gigabit,
Right.
etc. It's like if you do have a lot of people on a lower tier of service, then and it is capped somehow, then you don't need to buy as much bulk bandwidth from your
See, I don't. Yeah, I would
upstream
love to
provider.
understand that.
So
And I don't feel like I have a very granular understanding of that.
Yeah.
But based on that survey, you brought up the survey data. I mean, if there's any possible way that we can do a inexpensive entry level, I mean, there are people who would pay who don't need more than 1010. You know what I mean?
So,
like,
I can.
yeah. I know maybe that's out of scope, but
We're not entirely. Well, 1010's a bit below. I think what we want to do, but no, I hear what you're saying.
there's people who don't need more than 1010. Like
To go back to the point about Matrix 1 though, and the backhaul and the amount of bandwidth that we might be looking at having to purchase. And also looking at how our, people have said we want to have affordable service. Maybe we only have one tier of plan, but maybe it's not a gig. Maybe it's 300. And that's way better than what you could get now, and it's way more than you're probably ever going to use in the modern time. But how much of a difference if it's fiber, and it's Margaret, this is fiber, and it's 300 up, down? And can we get that cost down below 70 or at 70 or 60 or whatever?
Well, you recoup the cost of the
Well, and that's something that I think we're going to have to, that's where probably a business plan is going to have to be important.
This is
I don't
very
have
detailed.
a data on it, but I think your lowest tier of customer usually generates your highest amount of calls and user support, and they're going to be the ones who are like, why isn't my Netflix working when I'm trying to do 15 other things with this same connection?
My one thing is that I don't know this for sure, but the sense that I get, and I totally hear what you're saying, the sense that I get is that the vast majority of the costs for which you need revenue to cover them are costs that are going to be exactly the same regardless of how much speed is actually going to be provided. So my question is if you have so you can provide someone with a lower speed for less money. If it costs 95% of what it does for that standard tier, then I wonder if
It
there's
works for the consumer, but not for the
Seems to
people
me
building up
like-
the business.
Charging higher for businesses for service.
No, I meant just having the one, pay rate and set it around 70 to 80.
Well, what I'm thinking is keep the speeds the same, but change the service level that you provide. I mean, maybe higher for business is one thing we were talking about, but higher for, Erica and I would pay higher because we use it for work. We need that bandwidth. We need
Or I would be more it would interest me more to have a single tier in order to fund a way of giving discounted internet to subsidized internet to below a certain income level or something like that.
Yeah, he's like,
I like that. I very much like that idea.
I agree with that.
You'll be in charge of that, Harry.
I got a question. I have Verizon DSL in my house, okay? And everybody laughed
You're
at
like
that.
you're the only customer, so you get.
Well, I know it hasn't broken down in 3 or 4 years. The last time I had a breakdown was my modem went, so I had to pay for that. But that gets up every day. So what would entice me as just a little small homeowner down on Clark Street to get in something like this?
It wouldn't. That's the thing.
What are you
How does,
paying?
you guys are talking about 1 gig, right?
What are you paying
Yeah,
for
look, I know nothing
DSL?
about that. How does my service compare to 1G? 1 gig. How does that,
It's about 100th,
about 100 for that?
probably.
How much do you pay a month for?
You're probably gonna have about
DSL?
10.
I'm not sure. I don't know. My wife takes care of all of that. I just live
Probably
there.
like half.
I'm guessing it's $40 to $50.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
it
probably
is.
run or something.
I know they were selling it at $39.99, but that could have been an introductory.
You're also just talking about download speed.
Yeah, but the thing is,
Right.
the-
And your upload speed is probably about 1,000.
Yeah, but let's put it this way. I turn this thing on in the morning. I'm just trying to tell you what I go through. Okay?
Yeah,
I turn it on in the morning, the thing comes right on. I sign on to the internet with a password, I should normally would. I get in my emails. I sell stuff on eBay. I do Ameritrade stock trades.
Yep.
I do everything what I have to do, research all the stock, and that's just instantaneous. It isn't like it takes forever. That thing just goes.
But if you have a ton of other DSL users that are on that same line as you, then it's something.
Yeah, but I never
like
experienced
yeah.
that.
Well, that's why there aren't that many
there's
DSL
part of
users
that,
anymore.
right,
You might be the
competition
only one that's
aspect.
Probably don't
And
understand it.
actually, my dad for a long time used DSL for his business because it's not an internet business. So then he looked at it and it said, and it was and the DSL was much more expensive than the cable.
Well, 15 years ago, it was state of the art.
So it's possible that DSL is not any more expensive, any cheaper than And,
Well, what
The
would
way you
happen?
would benefit is that DSL would probably in some way potentially change their rates that would benefit you by the introduction of this service.
If I wanted to say I'm on a stream TV through my internet, right? Could I do that with this, with my
Say that
DSL?
again? I'm sorry.
If I want to run my television, say through my...
No,
my
probably not very well.
No.
Do you have Netflix
DSL is
now?
not fast
No.
enough.
I get none of that stuff.
I would be interested to see you.
No, it
look up
would be
and see.
buffering. There would definitely be
Yeah.
buffering.
Do you ever try and like Skype with family members?
No, never done that either.
So I mean that
You're a very
category of
specific
person
use case.
is the person who would I would want to see us be able to provide a really low cost tier too. But if they wouldn't, if not an early adopter for any means, and not even necessarily an adopter, because like somebody who has service at a cost that they like at a speed that works, there's no reason for them to spend any more.
So in
money.
this conversation, in terms of the report, you know, we might be able to put somewhere in here that this is one of the things that may appeal to our community down the road. But I think what we're really talking about is more along the lines of what the business plan would be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you bring up an interesting point in that it might be useful to include in the report the idea of, in web development or software development, we talk about user stories, and here's your users.
Right.
You could break down Easthampton into users and say, here's the profile of some of the typical potential
If I get 1G,
subscribers.
you know, whatever that is.
Yeah, but these are the
For the same price that I'm paying for my DSL,
Yeah.
I snap right now.
here's their different demographics, here's the internet habits of these different,
Video
these are the
game or
people that are
drinking choke
likely,
cola.
yeah.
Yeah.
These are the likely adopters, these are the unlikely adopters, or here's where we're gonna, you know, a marketing plan wouldn't maybe, unless you had a service that fit your needs,
Yeah.
then it might be, you might just benefit from having increased competition.
Yeah.
So we have existing infrastructure primer and we have
Right.
risks, competition, but do we have current market environment?
I think that would
Yeah.
be in no, we don't currently.
I
Yeah,
think in the sworn we said
yeah, we did talk
existing
about that
infrastructure.
About it.
I know, but that was more like what dark fiber is on poles.
You
Like,
mentioned at one point what the
Yeah.
options are in Easthampton now. He talked about
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So
I
you
just
got
didn't know if it
charter,
was-
you got use, and what, you know, there's not that
I think
many
that would be in the
DSL.
synopsis, right? So it would be like competitive
Yeah, this is
landscape or
the-
market
or
landscape.
the primer, as in
Right.
Right.
what exists now. But.
Right.
Yeah, I would put it in the primer, but whatever. I mean, we can
Move stuff
move stuff around. Yeah. I guess the one other thing that we haven't talked about yet is like whatever the opposite of risks are. Like, here are some cool things that you might be able to do with this. So, you know, for instance, a good deal of time has gone to discussing whether or not we could make like so many MLPs make pilot payments to the
Right.
city. You know?
Also, streaming packages would probably be something we haven't mentioned yet.
What
Like
about the
Westfield's
risk of
doing.
not doing it? The risks of not doing it are
Yeah.
that everybody else is doing it, and suddenly you become a lot less attractive.
That's true.
Like if
Yeah.
everybody around you has a municipal network,
And we're just
has
at
a
this weird
fiber,
little void
and
of.
you're just you're the donut hole.
Yep.
We should also, somewhere in this, talk about, or have a short bit about Easthampton Media.
Well, that's what I was saying with like.
That's kind of the opposite of risks.
Yeah,
That's
we
how
say
we
like,
think of it.
oh, there's, you know, I mean, because really, we could make a, I mean, the way, what I was thinking is you could just make a pilot payment to the city with an understanding the city's gonna transfer it to Easthampton Media, or to the library, or to any number of other good causes where it's just like, oh, hey, here's some money. There's probably other markets an MLP could theoretically consider entering at some point. Like, I don't know, there's all sorts of,
Yeah, and actually, you know, it might make sense to have a section about cable TV and like what like how we would go, like whether we would set up a contract distribute cable TV.
That would be under benefits, we could use it as a streaming platform.
I
It's the
actually
model that Westfield and Greenfield's doing their own in-house like everything else.
Right. I mean, I think having a section on a short section on TV makes a lot of sense
Well, I
because
see that under the benefits.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
could
to
work
just
as a
say-
streaming
I would include
platform.
phone and
yeah.
voice
Yeah,
service
That's a good point.
as well. I mean, the possibility
Service
of
offerings.
service offerings.
Yeah.
Well, we had talked about a tie-in with emergency, although I'm not sure how tenable that is.
Yeah, the sense I got is that like it might work, but it would probably
It's-
cost more money in legal fees
Yeah.
to establish it than
Okay,
we could
so
say.
I think we can let that one go.
But that might be a thing we want to mention at some point.
Yeah,
They say,
yeah, yeah.
there's this thing.
You know,
Definitely
we probably got enough here to draw up a really decent outline, because once we start digging into this thing, we're gonna find out we forgot.
Yeah.
You know.
Okay, so maybe that's what we do is we condense this into an outline.
Yeah.
Circulate, like send it out.
Right.
And that then
And
gives
people can
us.
sign up for sections then.
Well, my thought was that gives us then the month, right, to think
Right.
about what are we missing.
Okay.
Maybe this should go over here.
Actually, it might make sense to distribute this to the public, and have the public weigh in.
I totally disagree.
No, I totally disagree too.
Especially with
We gotta
the,
get this report done. We've gotten the
Right.
public feedback now. We don't need any
Yeah,
more. We gotta focus and write the
and the
report.
public obviously.
You know, at some
they see
point,
this,
once
but,
the government has taken over this, the public's gonna have plenty of ways, you know, to get input back.
And the public
And,
Yeah,
willing,
yeah,
is
right.
able to come and speak
Yeah.
to anything, that if you have any thoughts on this,
All the reports online, like I don't know anything about what Westfield or Greenfield has done. Like
Okay.
that you guys have been.
Oh, yeah, let's talk after.
Yeah.
I think we can probably connect you with some stuff.
Also,
Oh, yeah.
all our previous
Absolutely.
meetings
Yeah.
are on YouTube.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I think that so we get an outline, and maybe that's next meeting is we vote on, this is our outline, and then we start breaking up, who wants to do what, and we discuss how we want to
We
structure
could
that.
even, if we have a mail chain go and say, well, I'd be interested in working on this section, with.
Yeah, I don't
getting
feel like
into-
that's,
Or do you
I
wanna
mean,
wait
well,
till
I
next
think we do
meeting?
need to vote, I think it would probably
Get
makes
the
sense
outline done and.
to vote on an outline,
That's
and
fine.
then,
So I volunteer to turn this into a type organized outline document that we can then comment on or.
yeah.
You
that would
haven't
be.
captured all of it in notes, so just your,
I got
Jason.
I don't have
has-
anyone else's
Image.
written notes, but you can send the
He's
image.
got that, and I've got all the written notes, so I'll try,
Yeah,
and we can all
coordinate with
touch
Kevin.
that, and
Oh, we
then
have
once
to
we
do
have an
that.
outline, we'll be ready for next month.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, and
Alright.
yeah, I mean, I'd say
I've tried to do that.
at your, you got a little bit less busy.
No, yeah.
Yeah.
A little bit.
I'd say, as soon as you could, that would be awesome, just so that
I'll work on it today and tomorrow.
we have time to really digest it
Yeah.
and whatever. And then once we have that, it might be a good idea to even consider if we're breaking it out, almost doing subcommittees,
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
okay, 3 of us are going to meet once a month at a separate date to discuss just how, this stuff and really get this looking good before we bring it back. Not that I think that has to be mandatory, but if people really want to just really dig into this, that might, that's how the city council works. It might not be a terrible idea.
Yeah, I think we're gonna have as many questions as we have material
Right.
ready to go and research needs or follow-up.
Yeah, I wouldn't be at all surprised if it comes back and we come back and say, oh, here are 30 questions we realized
Right.
that we needed to answer before we handed this over, and we need to really start digging into all of
This
that.
is going to be the way to get there.
No,
But
this
I-
is
I
why I
like
was
this.
pushing the outline last
Yeah.
month. We just took the first step, so now we can get this done.
Sweet.
I mean, can we give feedback on an outline via email?
I would
You could just
prefer
do
that
a
we
Google
not
Doc,
discuss
but you can
any.
get- you could do like a Google Doc chain, but I've been involved in some of those things where it's like.
So,
you know.
so do we want to have a non-quorum number of people who will assist in giving outline feedback, so we potentially have an outline ready to vote on at the next meeting?
I would say that
you know.
You could distill this, if you want to bounce it off of one or two people, that's totally fine and kosher.
I
And
volunteer.
Okay.
Please bounce it off.
And then
Yeah,
at some
okay.
point, if we have a good version, then we just send it out to the whole committee.
we send it out, and then
Right,
anyone
but
can
that,
bring
that
their
you can't
amendments.
give feedback on.
Yeah.
I think if we have it in a format that we can start moving it around, you know, if we have a laptop next meeting
Yeah.
here, we can start indenting and outdenting.
I suppose
like
if-
reorganize
if
sections and.
If I send a document of draft to everybody, then people can respond to me directly with
Yes.
feedback.
Maybe.
No?
I would.
Maybe.
I think that the
Or at
best,
least just
the
give
most,
it to us a week before the next meeting.
Right. I think the
so
best
we
way
have a
to,
week to
yeah, is
digest it.
if we have it out and we have time, then I can come in and say, oh, you know what, under this, can we add a section that this?
Right.
All in favor, you know, and then we go like that through it. It's a little bit messy, but it's important that the public is able to view and understand
I'm
the
all for
process.
public, able, due process.
Even if they're messy.
Yeah, especially.
Yeah.
Cool,
Okay.
it's good.
Will you send that to me now? Or
Yeah, yeah.
have you
I'll get your
typed that?
email or your.
I'll just wait until you guys have a doc then, and I can just proofread it against my notes.
Cool.
Great. Good.
Alright, so in February's meeting, we're gonna discuss the crowdsourced utility pole survey ideas a little
If
bit.
anyone has ideas that they want, if
Ideas or,
I
mean, you can-
Obviously, I was, paying attention myself, just noticing, Route 141 and Route 10, so yeah, I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that would be good.
if you want to put it as an agenda, if people have things that they want to comment on about it, but this doesn't necessarily need
Okay.
more discussion.
I really just want to know what our one absent member tonight had to think about it, because he's.
I know he's the most
Thompson.
experienced in that regard.
Well, so yeah, let's do that, and we can approve an outline, and we can.
yeah, we can improve an outline, we'll divvy up some of the sections for people who want to work on certain things. Maybe we'll form some subcommittees as far as that goes. In March, we'll regroup, we'll look at what we have.
February.
We'll
February is when we approve the.
Oh, sorry.
yeah, when we come back to meet in March, we'll bring everything we have to the table, we'll kind of refine it, comb through it, and look at what needs to be adjusted, and maybe by April we'll have a finished report.
That'd be cool.
That might be
Sounds
it.
good.
Maybe overly ambitious,
I
but
think there might be another month or
Maybe
two in
another
there
month or two.
of,
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked.
of writing and going back and
Let's say for April, and then what it
Yeah,
evolves, as it goes.
Well, if we plan for April,
Devolve, is that what you
it'll, plan for
You're
April,
gonna
it'll
be
be
working
finished
for
by June.
Elizabeth
Hey,
Warren by
if we
then.
can get in time, so that we can, are we legally now authorized to form a MLP without requiring any more votes? Or do we need to do one more town vote?
No,
No,
we're good. There might need to be a city council vote.
Yeah.
But like the public has voted.
Yeah.
The city council's voted twice.
Right, yeah.
So we're
Yeah.
good. I think it's just up to the mayor at this point.
Yeah, to go
That's
through
my
the motions.
understanding.
Yeah.
But I don't think the mayor is going to take a lot of steps towards that until this report.
Oh, yeah,
Of course.
So-
Yeah, it would be,
Yeah,
yeah, so,
so,
but it's exciting.
cool.
Okay, is there any new business anybody'd like to bring forward? No? Is there a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn. Motion to adjourn.
Second.
And seconds, all in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.